What's up, people? Welcome back to the TD show. Super exciting week for college football, especially right here in Eugene. We got college game day setting up as we speak tomorrow. I'll be there out at the set to talk to David Pollock, Desmond Howard, Reese Davis, the hosts. Usually they talk to the media the day before game day, so that'll be a lot of fun hearing from them. But we're going to talk about this game. So excited for this one, UCLA and Oregon, a game where the storylines just kind of write themselves. You know, you got the Dan Lanning era, all the new shiny things going on in Oregon, and then you got the elder statesman, the guy that kind of put things in place here. Chip Kelly coming back. You got game day here. First top 10 matchup at Autzen Stadium since 2014. I mean, it's almost hard to believe. Daniel Hailpern joining us. He's our resident USC expert on a lot of things college football. But Dan, first top 10 matchup in Autzen Stadium since 2014. Kind of a crazy stat with all the big games that have happened here. But, is the Pac-12 back? Is that what we're saying?
I think it might be a little early to say the Pac-12 is back. But, hey, number 9 UCLA, still undefeated. Oregon with that one loss in week 1 against Georgia, definitely not crippling a season by any means that early on against one of the best, if not the best team in the nation. They're at number 10. There will be fireworks. I'm not sure if they're going to be lighting up the scoreboard, probably, but just in terms of like the gravity of this game, there will be fireworks.
Yeah, absolutely. Game day. I'm excited to talk to the host tomorrow because I know that Eugene is one of their favorite places to go all the time because of that atmosphere and the way that it'll bleed straight into the game at 12:30. I think it'll be one of the coolest experiences that I'll get to take part in at Autzen Stadium. So very pumped to be there for that game, doing preparations right now. But yeah, you talk about how that's really the story with Oregon, right? Is how they've responded from that Georgia game. I think that when you get beat like that in such a big game, you get hyped up for, and that's the result. It can cripple your season, or at least a large part of it. I think that we've seen pretty clearly that they've done a good job of flushing that one away and continuing to gain momentum. They don't have like that signature win yet. I think maybe the hype has gone a little too far because I think that what's happened so far this season is they've avoided the disasters, the trap games that previous Oregon teams have not been able to avoid, like a night game in Tucson, and always has a little bit of a spooky vibe, regardless of how good the Wildcats are. Playing Stanford at any time always kind of scares Oregon fans. I mean, we saw it last year. That Cardinal team was truly putrid, and they ended up taking down the Ducks and kind of ending their playoff hopes. So what they've done so far is they've avoided the disaster. Now they're looking for that big signature win. We thought maybe BYU was that. That hasn't aged as well. But this is it. Here it is. Two teams that are sitting atop the Pac-12. USC kind of out of the way. Losing to Utah really makes this game for pole position. Like, this is the one. You're vaulted up to number 1 in the Pac-12 standings, and you have the inside track to getting to Las Vegas. Now, I think some interesting things about this matchup. I think number 1, we're going to see two offenses that are extremely similar in terms of the run-pass option. Both are utilizing a dual-threat quarterback to their biggest extent. DTR's always, had the running ability, always had the ability to take off in the open field. But we're seeing, I think, some different juice from Bo Nix this year. He's more unlocked as a runner. Had an 80-yarder against Stanford. His previous long was 30. So that guy's cooking right now. And it's two quarterbacks that have hung around college football, for a while. They're kind of the last guys at the bar, like that guy's still here, like, I guess if you're pointing that out, you're also one of the last guys at the bar. But I guess maybe that's not the best metaphor. But two guys that have hung around college football forever. I mean, DTR burst on the scene in 2018, Bo Nix 2019, but two guys that have had a lot of ups and downs, and right now they're on the ups. And both guys, I think, are truly playing the best football of their entire careers. They're both playing extremely efficiently. DTR's completion percentage is 75%, and he's like 80% on first down. And when you're that good on first down, creating those 2nd and 2s, 3rd and 1s, like that's the recipe for these really good spread option rushing attacks, is getting into those 3rd and 3s versus 3rd and 8s. So say all that to say, they got two quarterbacks playing their best football, guys with a lot of experience, not going to be intimidated by this game, obviously. And you have two very similar styles of attack, two similar approaches. In fact, they have pretty much the identical run to pass ratios. They both like to run it 55% of the time, 45% pass. So in this era, of offensive explosion, these are two teams that do have a little bit of old school to them, that like to pound the rock. They like to run it up the middle. They've got big backs like UCLA with Zach Charbonnet. Like stopping him is going to be key. But that's the thing, is that Oregon's rush defense has been their biggest strength. That's really the one matchup to kind of hone in on here is Oregon's defensive front against the UCLA ground attack. Oregon ranks like 13th in the nation in rushing defense, UCLA 20th overall in rushing offense. So can Oregon's defensive line continue to impress? They have two guys that have played really well recently. Brandon Dorlus is looking like, definitely all Pac-12, potentially All-American. He took over the game against Stanford, the last one that I was able to go to. And then they've also got another guy kind of rising right now, Casey Rogers, who's been around for a while, but finally kind of breaking through. So it's Oregon's defensive front against UCLA's offensive line. It is a key matchup. And then, Oregon does very similar things on their own, with their stable of running backs that have done a really good job so far. Bucky Irving, what a fun player to watch. He's been the breakthrough. A lot of guys wanted Byron Cardwell to play. He ended up kind of getting some injuries, getting dinged up a little bit. But this guy, Bucky Irving, it's like you run a play to the left, like a simple dive play to the left. All of a sudden, he's 15 yards to the right. Like he breaks tackles, his vision. He sees holes that aren't there. So it's going to be a lot of this game is going to be played on the ground. I don't think that the quarterbacks will be attempting 35, 40 passes. I think each team is going to come in with the same game plan of trying to pound the other team, and it could create a little bit of an old school vibe, and it's going to be incumbent on the defensive lines to make some big stops. So super exciting matchup. One huge thing to keep an eye on too is Oregon had a Chick-fil-A food truck there yesterday, and Bo Nix has been devoid of Chick-fil-A for this entire season. There's not one in Eugene. I feel his pain. Like as a Southern gentleman, as a man, that sounded weird, but as a man from Atlanta, going without Chick-fil-A for a long time, there are kind of, we all have our predisposed things and allergies and things like that. But going without it, it can have like visceral, physical, reactions. I've had a hard time with it. So the fact that Bo Nix got Chick-fil-A into his body a few days before the game, who knows what that's going to do, Dan?
Both these teams are coming off their bye week, which is giving them a lot more time to prepare. But now that I think about it, you're saying it helps them. We've all had Chick-fil-A before. Are we sure it's helping?
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, well, maybe. Yeah, because he's playing his best football without Chick-fil-A. Is he going to go back to old Bo, bad Bo? I don't know.
I think it's very dependent on if there were the peach milkshakes on that truck. And I don't know if it's in season or not. So really, really just interested to see what happens in this one. And as I was saying, both are coming off bye weeks. What do you think both team coaches, I guess, were working on during those bye weeks to help get this very important win at this point of the season? I mean, there's really no bigger game in college football this week.
Absolutely. Well, first, I mean, you're right. Drinking a peach milkshake and running 80 yards down the field, that's really hard. Maybe he doesn't.
I don't know if Bo Nix can get the scamper going if he had too many nuggets, right?
Do some digging on this. It's going to be like my long-term investigative project over the season. But no, yeah, crazy great timing for both teams. I think getting that bye week when it happened, extra time to prepare for this game, kind of refocus. And Oregon has a lot to clean up. I mean, I think that right now their biggest weaknesses are red zone offense and third down defense. I think those are the two situations that they were working on the most during the bye week and continuing into this week. I think that's exactly what Dan Lanning said in his availability on Wednesday too, that those were two things they're working on. I think they're constantly working on discipline. It was pretty eye-popping to have 14 penalties against Stanford. It was a huge point of criticism from the fan base. They did cut it down to 7 for the next week against Arizona. And I think that is something you can say about this Oregon team so far. Like maybe they don't have like that signature win yet. Signature moment, I guess, would be the comeback against Washington State. But I think what we do know about this team is that when they identify areas of weakness, they have shown the ability to like go and fix that, to like turn it into action. It's not like the Clay Helton era at USC where you heard things were going to get better, but they never actually did. Things have gotten better. So, and that happened with like missed tackling, defending the perimeter on defense. They did a poor job in the beginning. They've gotten a lot better there. So those are the two areas I would say for Oregon: red zone offense, third down defense, getting off the field, and avoiding penalties. And then for UCLA, I think for them, it's about kind of mentally getting ready to go into Autzen Stadium, because that's a huge part of this. I mean, extremely tough place to play. It's loud. They've won 22 games in a row there, third longest active streak in the nation. And UCLA, if you look at what they've done in their resume so far, pretty much all of their wins have been at home in the Rose Bowl and the comfort of, their grandmothers and the other four people in the stands. So it's a different environment that they'll be stepping into. Obviously, guys understand that, and you can talk about it, and you can have the past experience, but until you're actually out there in the mix of it and you can't hear your signals because Autzen Stadium is rocking, like then it starts to have an impact on the game. So I think that's the biggest thing that UCLA was at least trying to prepare for, because, their win against Washington was not in Seattle. And then their win against Utah was at the Rose Bowl. So they haven't really had to go into a hostile environment quite like this one yet.
You got a pick for this game?
I think so, yeah. I think Oregon gets it done for the reasons I mentioned, it being at home. I think will play a big impact on this. I think that they'll have more success against UCLA's defensive front than UCLA is able to muster against guys like Brandon Dorlus and Casey Rogers. It's going to come down to it's a game that comes down to the defensive linemen, I think, in this one. It is what's going to determine it. So I've got Oregon. I would say I think it's going to be a good one. I think like in the 31-25, like that type of range. That might be like scoregami, but something like that. I mean, barely even talked about the Chip Kelly element of this too, but that certainly adds some juice to this game. The Ducks have it's kind of the meta overarching storyline of all of this is that Oregon in the offseason was in this like really this war between the fans, former players of who are we? What are we trying to be? Do we go back into the past and try to recreate the glory of Chip Kelly? They even tried to bring him back. I mean, it's been reported they tried to bring him back like both times they've had an opening recently. Or do we go into the future with this SEC model, this recruiting heavy national brand approach, or kind of like the, offensive wizardry, like the old Oregon versus the new Oregon. And it's cool that, you get to see that all clash here. So it's going to be it's going to be very exciting. You always want to pick up a win over, the guy that put a lot of this in place. Like it would be just a good signal to the fan base, I think, that Dan Lanning's taking this thing in the right direction. So a lot of symbolism involved. Obviously, not much of that's going to matter when it's actually on the field. That's when it's going to be about, I think, the defensive linemen in this one, which D-line comes up with bigger plays, bigger stops. So super excited for this one. Going to talk to the game day guys. Going to have a lot of fun with that. So that pretty much wraps up this portion of the show. Coming back, we're going to expand the horizons a little bit, go outside the Pac-12, and we'll talk about something I'm passionate about recently. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to the TD show. Just broke down the mega matchup in the Pac-12, one of the biggest matchups in the Pac-12 in recent memory. Oregon against UCLA, going to be a lot of fun on Saturday. But I want to talk about something else this episode too, outside of the West Coast. Something going on in Jackson, Mississippi, with a certain Deion Sanders leading that Jackson State program. For some background, for those that don't know, Deion Sanders, I think everybody knows, two-sport athlete, Hall of Famer, played in a World Series, ended up coaching his kids in Texas in high school football. And after the George Floyd protests, after all that happened, all the unrest, he decided, I'm going to do something about this. I'm going to help my community, and I'm going to go coach at a HBCU that's having a tough time, didn't have the facilities, didn't have any of the resources. And he's pretty much changed the face of HBCU football overnight, like almost immediately. In the couple of seasons he's been there, there's games on ESPN now. They have corporate sponsors. The facilities are getting better. He's trying to help out that entire community. So I think what he's doing there is incredible. And this brings me to my hot take at the end of all of this. And it's that at some point, Deion Sanders will lead a major program. I think that's, not even up for debate. I think I watched the 60 Minutes piece on him that was excellent, that everyone should watch. And at the end of it, they asked the question, what happens? Are you going to move on after this? And you said, I would be dumb not to think about it. So we assume at some point that Deion will move on to the bright lights of big time college football coaching. But my hot take is that I think with everything combined that he brings to the table, he will win a national title at some point in his career. And I say that because he has the ability to recruit. We've seen him bring in the number one player in the nation to Jackson State over Power 5 teams. I mean, that is ridiculous. We've seen him able to kind of grease the wheels on things and get things done, get sponsorships, get money. And that's huge in college football, like being able to negotiate with your athletic department. Hey, we need a new indoor facility. Like, you got to keep up with the Joneses in this industry. You have to have the PS4s in the locker rooms, the water slides, the chocolate fountains. You got to be Willy Wonka in this thing. You got to have the Oompa Loompas bringing everybody the moist towelettes. And after the third quarter, it's college football. This is the world we live in. We're not here to debate if it's okay or not, or if it should be this way. The bottom line is Deion Sanders will get you those things. He will grease those wheels. He has the name brand, the recognition, but those are the obvious things, right? We know Deion can recruit. We know he can brand. We know he can do all that. I think he's also a really good football coach too. And I see that in the way he's tutored his son, a quarterback. I mean, he's a defensive back who understands the quarterback position enough to tutor his son into becoming an NFL draft prospect. And I think he's a really good coach. From the documentaries I've seen, the clips from that 60 Minutes, he seems like he actually brings like a very old school approach to coaching football. And I think all of those things combined, I think, is the perfect recipe for an eventual national title at an SEC type program. Dan, what do you think about that take?
I think that the sky is the limit for Deion. And I think that where a lot of it comes from is where he feels, what he feels like his ultimate goal at this program is. He wants to stay at Jackson State and see through. I mean, he has Travis Hunter, the number one prospect in the nation, coming there. I don't think Deion's ready to leave before Hunter ever steps on the field for them. I was looking up earlier. Do you know how many of the top 20 recruits in Jackson State history have come from Deion Sanders? 19 out of the top 20, and it's 1 through 19. He has taken this program and he's put all of his blood, sweat, and tears into it. And I don't think he's ready to leave. I think he wants to see it through a little bit more, see what the fruits of his labor are before he goes and moves on. But as you were saying, and as Deion was saying, he's going to look at the openings. And if he's offered something, like, why would he not look at it? But at the same time, I don't think an opening like Nebraska or Wisconsin is what he's looking for. I think he's not going to take anything less than something like his alma mater, like Florida State. And I don't think that job's definitely going to be opening up at least this year, if not maybe a couple more years. We'll see what happens down in Tallahassee. But I think that it's going to take a significant program opening to drag him away from Jackson State, because I think he does enjoy what he's doing there. And I think that it's work that he sees like it is helping. It's big in the community, and it's big for the players that he's helping mold.
Isn't the criticism funny? It's always like people afraid of change. And the criticism is always, when they land these recruits or they have a guy in the mix against like in Alabama, it's like, well, they're just, paying them a bunch of money. It's like, yeah, is that any different than what Tennessee's been doing? I mean, people are so afraid of change and people afraid of NIL and all that stuff. I'd argue that's already helped the game. I mean, I think that's already kind of vaulted Tennessee back up with the big boys. Like, it's allowed for more upsets and more equal spread of talent. But people mad that he's disrupting college football. It's like, well, deal with it. Like, because it's an HBCU. I mean, I don't get the criticism. There's so many programs that have risen and fallen throughout this sports history. Like, why not disrupt the entire game and help the underserved and help these programs that have so much history and could have won like national titles in like the 60s and 70s. Some of the talent they had when that actually was the only option, with Walter Payton and Jerry Rice and Shannon Sharp coming out of these schools. They have this tremendous history, and the fact that he's restoring it and restoring what was a really, really dire situation. What is a dire situation? I mean, for whatever reason, for the inequality that we have in this country, those schools have less resources and less money to work with. And what he's doing there is creating opportunities, for kids to go to college, and for kids to see HBCUs as a vehicle to get to the NFL. I mean, that is a pretty radical idea in the current state of college football. So very cool. I think it's very cool and commendable what he's doing. I think he's helping out the community, helping out an underserved part of the country, and helping all the other schools in there. I think he's bombastic. I think he's brash. I think he's going to ruffle a lot of feathers in his career, get into a couple more post-game dust-ups in the SEC. But you know what? Who doesn't love a good dust-up? Just more. He understands good TV, and I think he'll be a really, really good coach at an even higher level. So, yeah, excited about that. We'll be right back. We're going to wrap things up here shortly. All right, welcome back. One final section of the show. This is kind of the junk drawer of the show. We kind of never have a plan. I always tell Dan, like, I don't really have a plan for this, and he's like, you got nothing? I'm like, no, it's just an empty part of the Google Doc.
So what's in the junk drawer this week, Trevor?
Oh, Dad, I'm eliminated from the Madden playoffs. It was a good...
No! Oh, that's horrible news. I'm so sorry to hear, Trevor. I know that was really, besides Oregon football and all the great work you're doing, I know that was really the only thing keeping you going. So I'm sorry to hear.
I had some good wins. It was a good season for me. I'm the Lions. I think I like the core there. But it was like, it's this new guy. First of all, it's a new guy in the league. It's been like the same group for like 7 years. And there's this new guy. No one seems to know where he came from. He's in the group chat, but no one, I haven't yet found the thread of who he's friends with. And I'm like, why did we just add another killer into this league of probably incredible Madden players? Like, why is there just another guy I'm losing to? If I want to lose, I want it to be to my friend. So that's part of it, but I just couldn't stop the run. And I think that's just I took this Lions team, not to deflect the blame. I don't want to be Lincoln Riley deflecting the blame, but it felt like I had taken this Lions team as far as this Lions team is going to go. And now I need some D tackles in there, because it's I wasn't defending the run and I got into really bad pass formations where he's hitting deep balls. So a lot of cleanup. I'm not as devastated. Dan had that reaction because he knows that a loss in the Madden playoffs has been enough for me to go and hide in shelter for weeks at a time. But I've come to terms with this one immediately. I think it was a talent deficiency that led to that. But what else is going on, man? Yeah, going to this UCLA Oregon game. And back to the Pac-12, and it being wide open, a lot of that's because of this USC-Utah game, or it's really because of that USC-Utah game that came down to the wire. Dan, as a USC guy, you have any final thoughts on what went down in that game?
There's a lot of different opinions coming out of it. And I'm very frustrated with the people who say coming into the season, when the schedule was dropped, everyone penciled this game in as you're on the road going to Utah. It's a night. Well, actually, I don't know if they knew it was going to be a night game at that point, but it ended up being a night game. This is the game we're supposed to lose. Well, as the season goes on, Utah comes in just losing to USC's rival, UCLA, and they have 2 losses on the season. And I think things are different. And for USC fans to just sit back and say, well, we were supposed to lose that one. Well, for the majority of that game, we should have won it. There were atrocious calls throughout, especially 2 horrible roughing the passer calls on the last scoring drive from Utah. Time and time again, there was just penalties keeping the drive alive. And I think that, if you're a fan of the Pac-12 and you just want to see the Pac-12 succeed, there's 3 teams that can get the conference to the playoff before that game to get us to that point. And it was USC who was 7th ranked going into that game after falling behind Tennessee, and then Tennessee even vaults up even more. Who knows what would have happened if they would have beat Utah in Utah? Maybe they climb back. I don't think Alabama would have fallen behind USC. These hypotheticals are always fun to play with, but I think staying at 7, but just being more confident at 7, closer wins later in the season wouldn't have knocked them down a peg. And then the other 2 teams, Oregon and UCLA, which after this week, one of them will still be alive. The other one probably knocked off the pedestal a little bit. And as a USC fan, you want nothing more than going into that UCLA game late in the season. Imagine if both schools are top 10 ranked, Both are still undefeated, and that whole dream is all gone now. And it's just a little bit disappointing. And I watching with our friend Jimmy throughout before they even crossed the 50-yard line, I said, if they score, they're going for two. It's not going to go for one and go for overtime. College football, I think, is so unique as compared to the NFL, where once you have those one or two losses and the college football is out of your grasp, why not lay it all out on the field every single week? Really go for it, because the difference between a 3-loss and a 4-loss team, or a little less with the 2 and 3, but still there, the difference between that is so negligible in the grand scheme of things. When you come up to these bowl games, a bowl game's a bowl game. If you're not competing for the playoff, why aren't you going for the win in every single one of these games? I don't think that anyone is going to hate on Whittingham for going for that and not making it, as compared to like the NFL, where you have a Josh McDaniels for the Raiders doing the same exact thing against the Chiefs, and he misses it, and everyone, goes after him and says, well, that was a horrible idea. I think it's just such different situations, comparing apples to oranges there. I still agree with Whittingham and Utah for going for it if they didn't get it. And it's easy to play this going back in Monday morning quarterback and the whole thing. But I stand with that take. And I think that that's one of the things that makes college football so great, is teams' willingness to go out there and just do it.
Yeah, Jonathan Smith for Oregon State did the same thing week 2 against Fresno State. 3 seconds left on the clock, opportunity to kick a field goal and go to overtime. And he said, in the post game, I didn't come there to go to overtime. We came to win. Pretty cool statement to make. But yeah, they go for it and win the game. And speaking of Oregon State, they're a team that's lurking around still. They've done a really good job of bouncing back from that 2-game losing streak, playing with a backup quarterback. They've been able to beat Stanford. And then Washington State, a team, that just gave Oregon fits. So the Beavers at 5-2, still in there. They have games against Cal, Arizona State, Colorado. They got Colorado this week, but those are 3 games that, you never want to just pencil in a W, but I'm penciling in a W. Like you'd hope the Beavers win those games,
You're saying Colorado, you're just penciling in a win. Well, the last completely defeated team in the nation finally got one last week against Cal, which is one of those other schools in there. So yeah, it should be pretty easy for Oregon State to knock off a couple wins before the end of the season. What do you think Oregon State could ultimately end their season at record-wise?
If we count those as wins, then you're looking at 8 wins, and then you have 2 more again that you can't just pencil in. Washington on the road in Seattle Friday night. That's tough. That's a tough game. And then Oregon, but maybe they take one of those. And I'm not, I'm not one of these guys. I'm not going to act like Oregon is automatically going to beat Oregon State. You always have to respect the rivalry and it being at Research Stadium. So I think the ceiling, say they take the gimme games and take one of those, I think 9-3 is very realistic. And that's commendable at Oregon State. And they've had really bad quarterback play to be at 5-2 right now. Their overall ratio, the starter had 8 touchdowns, 9 picks. The backups got 3 and 3. So they have not gotten good quarterback play. It's agonizing. I wish JT Daniels had picked Oregon State, not West Virginia. I feel like it would have been a better decision for both parties. Didn't work out that way, but that's a really good team. They're still in the mix. I think, 2 conference, 3 is the number where you're out. I think in the Pac-12, 3 conference losses, you're done, but 2, you're sticking around. So Oregon State, don't sleep on them. Excited about that. Colorado Saturday night. I should try. Initially, there was talk about me going to Oregon and then ripping a trip over to Reser. You know me, Dan. I'm like, yeah, that's the best day I can imagine. Not happening that way, but it would have been cool to get 2 games in one day. But it'll be a fun day of college football. Happy the Pac-12 is taking center stage. Be here next week to recap it all, react to it all. This is our moment, Dan. This is West Coast at its finest. This is a big moment for us.
Excited for it. I guess actually speaking of West Coast, just before we sign off here, one last little acknowledgement. Shout out Stanford. Getting the win over Notre Dame, 16-14. Very exciting.
Awesome. They didn't beat an FBS team since their acceptance rate was in the teens. It was amazing. All right. Good one to sign off on. Make sure to leave me in. I like when you leave me in walking out.